everybody, and welcome to Office Hours. I'm Adam Coble. This is episode 92, and here's the way it works. Every time we do an episode of Office Hours, I pick 3 questions. Those questions come from you. Maybe not specifically, but I can't see your face specifically, so I don't. But you, the general audience of the show, you go to my website, www.adam-coble.com. If you click on the Office Hours link, there's a form. Fill that form out. Take your questions from your mind and conjure them unto the form. And if you like, you can record your voice asking me your question. Some people do, some people don't. Either way is fine. I like being able to hear you, but that's just my preference. You do what works for you. And then we spend the episode, which usually is like 45 minutes to an hour or so, just talking about role-playing games. I answer the questions, but more often than not, the questions that you ask are a starting point for a larger conversation about RPGs and tabletop and game design in general. So today I have 2 questions with voice accompaniment and 1 question that I will read for the asker. Thanks to all who submitted. And we're going to talk about fictional positioning. We're going to talk about weird player behavior. We're going to talk about reward systems, all the good stuff that I love so very much. So our first question today comes from, let's see, who's our first question asker? Let's see here. There we go. Check it out.
Hi, Adam. I have a question about game design and hacking. I really like game systems that put a strong emphasis on fictional positioning. I also really like systems that give players a selection of cool special abilities with which to customize their characters and provide fun little buttons to press during play. My problem is that these 2 things seem to be inherently in conflict. For example, in hacking a Powered by the Apocalypse game, you might want to include a character move that lets you disarm an opponent during combat. But in a game where fictional positioning is so central, there's this unavoidable question of, well, why can't I do that anyway? I've got as far as the idea that a special ability should deal in guarantees and stipulations that give the player more narrative control in certain situations, but I found this is easier said than done. As someone who has designed a Powered by the Apocalypse game, do you have any advice for reconciling fun special abilities with a core philosophy that is so focused on fictional positioning?
This is such a good question. So it overlaps a whole bunch of really interesting things that I've kind of been thinking about in terms of role-playing games and how mechanisms work in games. We've talked about this question in chunks. I've kind of discussed it over several different streams and games, right? So there are a few things to sort of cover here. If you're not familiar with fictional positioning as a concept, I'm sure that it predates John Harper, but John Harper, in my mind, is the person who kind of got me turned on to the idea of fictional positioning. So when I speak to you about it, I am using John's ideas, but my own words, basically, because John taught me this. The idea is with fictional positioning, think about it this way, right? So you describe your character walking into a tavern, right? You say, I walk across the room to the bar and I pick up the mug of ale and I drink it and I put the cup back down. Now, describing those things, describing yourself entering the bar, walking across the bar's floor, walking up to the counter, picking up the ale, all of those things give you a fictional position from which to drink the ale. Another player his character might be standing outside. He might say, I also drink the ale, but he has no fictional positioning because his character has no ale. There's no ale in hand. You are outside the bar. Where did the ale come from? Fictional positioning allows us to understand within the shared mental narrative what we can and cannot do. And sometimes those things confer mechanical benefits, right? If you're playing a game like Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition or Burning Wheel, you can use your fictional positioning to leverage an advantage, a mechanical advantage. So in Dungeons & Dragons, for example, there are a list of given advantage indicators, right? Things that no matter what, if your character is in that mechanical or fictional position, you will have advantage. If you are attacking from stealth, if you are I don't know, using inspiration, right? Those things will all give you advantage to accomplish your goals. However, you can still leverage the idea of advantage mechanically by using the fictional positioning of your character. So if you want advantage in Dungeons and Dragons, you might say, before I attack, I leap up onto the table, granting me higher ground to attack down at my enemy over their shield. The GM might say, you know what? That makes sense. Take advantage, right? Add an extra die, take a benefit, whatever the game's language for giving you advantage or disadvantage. Fictional positioning at its core most purpose is simply a way for us to understand what is possible within the fiction of the game. Now, sometimes because fiction is loose, right? Fiction is not a concrete object. When I talk about things being concrete or non-concrete in a role-playing game, what I mean is this. Concrete is I have 17 strength. Let me try that again. Concrete is I have 8 strength. That is on my character sheet. It is a true fact about my character. It describes them in a mechanical way, and that is a fact. What is not as factual, what is looser and less concrete, is where my character might be standing, what my character looks like, what my character is wearing, how my character speaks, the effects of my character's actions in the game, right? This idea that I have in my head where Throndir is standing, what color Throndir's hair is, and how many swords Throndir is wearing on his belt, that is exclusive to my mind. Now, I might tell you Throndir carries 8 magic swords, right? And you might remember that, or you might not. It is a loose fictional object that has not been concretized unless I write down all 8 swords on my character sheet, right? So what we often interact with in role-playing games is that flow between the narrative creating mechanical objects and the mechanical objects of a game creating narrative, right? If on the character sheet there was a stat for number of swords, I would be obligated to put an 8 in that number because it is descriptive of a true thing in the fiction. This is why we play games with mechanics, because a game with no concrete objects, a game with no mechanical objects is just make 'em ups, right? It's cops and robbers. It's bang, bang, I shot you. No, you didn't. Haha, I run away. You can't run away. I tied your shoelaces together. No, you didn't. I'm wearing loafers. Right? That's a role-playing game with no mechanical rules. There's no rules to that game. Even adding something as simple as rock, paper, scissors, it then becomes, I shoot you. No, you didn't. Ha, yeah, see, I beat you. I shot you. Yes, now you're dead because of guns. We take the fictional positioning of the game and we turn it into something mechanically real by way of the mechanisms. Yes, I did literally just describe a scene from a Vampire the Masquerade LARP. Yes. Now, the trick is that it all flows together. You can't really have one without the other. Even a game that is not a role-playing game, even a board game, can contain its own fictional positioning. It just doesn't really matter that much. So, in a role-playing game, fictional positioning, games that care a lot about fictional positioning, like Powered by the Apocalypse games, might be referred to as fiction first. There are lots of different ways to divide games, but a fiction first game means you describe and the rules react to your description. A mechanisms first game, we were talking about this a little bit during the Far Verona design stream on Friday. The mechanisms first game says, here are the rules, here are the mechanical objects, now describe what those look like, right? It's the difference between when the rules step in to take action. In a fiction first game, the rules wait, they are reactive. Whereas in a mechanics first game, you choose the mechanic you want to engage, you make the roll or you do whatever the procedure is, and then you describe what it looks like. It's the difference between I draw my sword and I take a swing at them, and then I rolled my hack and slash move and it says I hit them and they hit me, and then we roll into the next move, versus I would like to make an attack roll. I have rolled an 18. Is that sufficient to hit? Yes, it is. All right, here's what that looks like. And then we move on to the next mechanism, right? It's which order you do the leapfrogging in. So the thing about Powered by the Apocalypse particularly is that it leans into fictional positioning to let you know what rules to trigger. Let me give you the dragon example from Dungeon World, right? In Dungeon World, if you want to attack a dragon, right? And we'll put up some givens about dragons. They're big, they have long tails, they can breathe fire, they have wings, they have claws the size of swords. They can't be hurt by normal weapons. And so you have to keep all that. That's the fictional positioning of the dragon, right? Is we know these things to be true about dragons because we figured them out in the game. Now, if I, as a player, say, I pick up a wooden spoon and I charge the dragon and I stab it with the wooden spoon, the rules of the game will not engage you. The GM will say, okay, the dragon breathes fire on you or whaps you with his tail, or depending on the GM style and the move that they're making, they might make a soft move or a hard move. But the idea here is you're not entitled to hack and slash, which is what you really want to do, until you have a magic sword, you've gotten in close enough to use it, and whatever other requirements might be there fictionally for that move. Whereas in Dungeons and Dragons, you make the attack first, and then you check to see what kind of mechanical requirements are there, and then you do the fiction. So in D&D, you would say, I move 30 feet, right? The dragon might get a special attack on me. It misses, it hits, whatever. Then I make my attack roll. I deal 1d4 damage, -1 because of my 8 strength. And then the GM says, your attack actually deals 0 damage because you hit it with a spoon. Right? Now, the narrative for both of these things, if you cut the game away and you just describe the story, they might look the same, right? We might be looking at two versions of the same scene, right? Moron attempts to attack a dragon with wooden spoon, right? But the way they handle those things is different. And so Alex's question is, in a game like Apocalypse World or Dungeon World or Monster Hearts, what do you do when you want the characters to be able to accomplish something, right? Because of fictional positioning that might be theoretically possible, right? With or without putting a move on it. Is it important to put a move in the game to represent a special ability, right? So let's talk about stealth. Let's talk about sneaking and hiding in Dungeon World. So in Dungeon World, all of the characters have access to the basic and special moves. So these are mechanical objects that every adventurer can do, right? This is like making an attack action in Dungeons and Dragons. It's like moving in Dungeons and Dragons. They're basic things that all characters are capable of from the get-go, right? Fighting with melee weapons, fighting with ranged weapons, talking shit to NPCs, looking around at stuff, knowing things, etc., right? Basic stuff that the game is built around. So that way, everyone can do it. It is a universal experience of every player character in Dungeon World. And then each character has their own special moves that they have access to. So wizards can cast spells, clerics can pray for magic, thieves can poison people. And one of the first things that people who are coming into a game like Dungeon World from Dungeons and Dragons, they almost always ask is, where is the thief's ability to sneak? How do I sneak? What is sneaking in this game? Now, we left that move off because we didn't want thieves to be the only ones that could sneak, but we also didn't want to codify the experience of skulking around because it's not a game about skulking. We didn't want to give a move to everyone. So in a way, the things that you give people moves for is a way for you to say, this is what this game cares about having a specific outcome for, right? So this is a way that you tone specific stuff. Now, I can't say necessarily in Dungeon World without putting a mechanism in the game that, I don't know, this game is about nonviolence, right? So if I say that in the text and then I have no mechanisms in the game isn't really about nonviolence. But if you put in moves that specifically constrain the narrative around violence, right? If you attempt to do injury to someone, make this move and this is what happens, you're putting a stake in the ground. You're saying this game cares about this in a specific mechanical way. So for Dungeon World, the absence of a specific move for stealth does not mean that stealth is not possible, right? It just means that there is no certainty and that we as designers didn't have anything to say about sneaking because it's not a game about that, but it doesn't mean you can't do it. Usually there's another move you could make or the GM just tells you what happens based on the normal structures of the game. So from the design side, it's about making choices about what your game is about and in what ways your game is about that, right? Placing a move about, convincing another character to act out of their best interest. Putting that move in the game means that this is a game in which all or some characters have that ability. That is important. You can learn so much about a Powered by the Apocalypse game by looking at the moves everyone has access to, right? Because that's the author saying, this is what this game is about. We care about these things in a specific and meaningful way, right? The other side of this, the player side, is, as some folks in chat have noticed already, it's about certainty. And I think what I like about this question is that this is already, you've already answered it, Alex, right? You know that it's about certainty, that anybody could theoretically do it, but if you give one character a move specifically for that thing, it's not about making them better or worse at it, because anybody with a +3 stealth could be good at this move. But if you give a specific when you sneak into a building move, or a when you try to avoid notice move, or when you stand perfectly still so no one can detect you move, you're saying this type of character or this person specifically now has a certainty of experience. And again, I'm gonna bring up Sagas of the Icelanders because I think that Sagas understands this better than any other Powered by the Apocalypse game. In that game, basic things you would expect just about anyone to be able to do are divided very clearly along gender lines, because that's what the game is about. It's about examining gender roles in 900 AD Iceland. But women have a move for talking, but no move for fighting, right? And men have a move for fighting, but no move for talking, which means that in the game's mechanisms, a player whose character is a woman has a degree of certainty around what might happen if she attempts to convince someone to do something with words. Whereas if she attempts to fight someone, she has no certainty whatsoever. That's all fictional positioning, right? Like if a woman character in Sagas of the Icelanders says, I put the sleeping potion in Ragdolf's drink, and when Ragdolf falls asleep at night, I take the sword from his scabbard, I sneak up to his bed, and I thrust it into his chest. They have no certainty that it's going to work. They have fictionally positioned themselves very well, right? They've poisoned somebody. They are helpless. They have a fictional position that if you are the GM of this game, you will probably say, okay, Ragdolf dies. The sword pierces his chest. He is dead in a pool of his own blood. But because the woman character has no violence move available, the GM could also just say, actually, you try to stab him, you go in at a funny angle, it hurts him, but he wakes up and shoves you to the floor. Now what do you do, right? Both of those are an equal and likely response to the fictional positioning because that character has no certainty in that moment. In the same way, in an earlier scene, if Ragdolf goes to, Odinson and says, I need you to give me 15 goats, Odinson could say, I need you to fuck directly off. And that's reasonable, right? The player of the male character has to, again, fictionally position themselves to try to angle in. Yes, Odinson is his own son. It's a complicated Listen. So the male character then has to, again, fictionally position himself. He has to come to Odin Odinson with reasons. He has to do the work. And really, the easy thing for him to do is to threaten Odin, son of Odin, with a sword, because threats and violence are a tool that that men have in that game. But it doesn't make it impossible. In the same way, if you put into your game a move about disarming someone and you give it to one specific character type, it does not mean no one else can attempt to disarm. It just means they have to do so purely fictionally with no mechanical certainty. It doesn't mean it's impossible. It's just that they have to come at it from a different angle. So I think this is a big pitfall of people who try to design Powered by the Apocalypse style games, right? This is about looking at moves not as a series of special abilities. And I think that that's easy to do. It's easy to make that mistake if you look at Dungeon World versus like Apocalypse World or Monster Hearts or Sagas, right? Dungeon World is, I am comfortable saying that Dungeon World is like the least nuanced, probably the stupidest of all of the Powered by the Apocalypse hacks that have ever been released, right? It doesn't require a ton of like deep analysis to understanding that game necessarily. And I think that it's the lowest barrier of entry of all the Powered by the Apocalypse games by design, right? That's so it's not a great one to look at when you're trying to understand the art form at some deeper level, right? And I'm fine and comfortable saying that, right? So I would say this, don't think about moves as special abilities that characters have necessarily. Think of them as ways that you can have certainty about the narrative, right? It's ways that when you say, I conjure forth the spirits of the earth to do my bidding, if you're a druid, the GM is probably going to say, cool, roll that move. Let's see how it goes. But if you're a fighter, you may still be able to conjure forth the spirits of the earth. It doesn't mean you can't do it because you don't have the move. It just might mean that something goes wrong or you have no certainty about the results, right? And this is something that I really like about the flexibility of the Powered by the Apocalypse engine, right? The thing that Vincent and Megway and others have built is that you can try almost anything. You're either going to trigger a move or the GM is going to make a move themselves and maybe tell you what else you need to do, right? And this is in a way how we angle into new moves. Repeating a behavior over and over, right, indicates that there might be an absence in the game systems for that move. And usually this happens in play, right? This is how we get setting specific moves. This is how we develop new things. Like I'm going to just say this, if you're playing Dungeon World and you've been playing it for a few sessions, you should be making notes about where the game is missing moves so that you can create your own. And then sometimes what you'll end up doing is realizing you've created 6 or 7 new moves that keep getting used, and maybe you're actually designing a new class, right? Or maybe you're creating a compendium class. Maybe something is happening there, because I believe, especially with Powered by the Apocalypse games, and this is something that they and the OSR have in common, I firmly believe that they are both a gameplay experience and a design experience. Right? I think that those two things in this particular game go very much hand in hand. And I think to a degree, that's why even now, like 10 years in, almost, Jesus Christ, that's an interesting thing to think about. We've been making PBTA games and talking about, 2d6 plus X for a while now, hey? We're getting there. So yeah, this is why I think Powered by the Apocalypse is so good. This is why it's interesting as a play and design, and why I think if you really want to go in on learning a Powered by the Apocalypse game, playing something like World of Dungeons, which has one move, and then building the moves up around it, that's the way to do it. That is my thought. I think that it's a fantastic framework for creating new stuff, and I think that the more that you do it, the more that you're going to understand it. Hopefully, Alex, that helps put some of that in perspective for you vis-a-vis my experience with Powered by the Apocalypse. But I mean, see what other people have to say, right? Look around on the old archive story games forum to see what Gregor Vuga had to say about designing sagas, right? Look for design documents about Monster Hearts. Check out Vincent's blog. There's so much more thinking about this engine and how it creates fiction. But I think you're on the right track, Alex. I think that's it. You came to the table with a pretty full understanding of the question. I hope I've been able to give you a little nudge forward from there. Our second question numero 2, comes from, I believe, Aurora. I think Aurora is the question asker. Aurora did not record their voice, so I will read this question for them. Aurora says, "Hey, Adam." Hello. Hi, Aurora. "I love your analyses of game systems and especially how you look at what a system rewards. It is very important to me if you have not noticed this yet. I notice most systems reward players on an individual level or for group accomplishments, not for sharing the spotlight. For example, Fate or Burning Wheel rewards you for adding difficulty with your traits, effectively for getting the spotlight. Do you know any good systems that reward players for giving other player characters a place to shine? For example, rewarding my thief, giving the priest an opportunity to explain their religion and converting her. If not, how would you design one?" I thought about this a little bit after I got this question initially, right? And I took a look at my shelf and I looked at some of the PDFs that I have. And I think you're right. I think that in my experience, most systems award you for nothing, right? Show up, play your character, whatever. Some systems award the group for doing group stuff, right? Accomplishing quests, whatever. There's no differentiation. And then some systems, my favorite systems, reward individual players for doing what the game wants them to do. The ones that jump to mind in this case are Burning Wheel, obviously, for Artha, and Blades in the Dark, right? Both of those invite you to explore your character. I think the reason that works and why it's so popular, if I had to guess, beyond like design momentum, is that it is fundamentally what you're doing is, if you're playing a role-playing game with individual rewards, it is a team game in the sense that you all want to overcome the challenges the GM puts in front of you, and you want to be the best on the team. This is it reflects sports almost exactly. If you are, Jesus Christ, okay, sports metaphors. If you are a member of a hockey team and you are the goalie, okay, I'm doing all right. Hang on, Adam, you can do this. You want your team to win the game. You would like to win this game against opponent team, right? You and the forward and the defense people and the coach. Anyway, everyone on your team wants the same. We all want the same thing. We want to win the game. But as the goalie, you want to be able to also say, I have blocked the most shots on goal of all the goalies, right? You yourself have an individual goal of blocking the puck from getting into the net in the same way that the forwards, that's what they're called in hockey, right? They want to put the puck in the net of the opponent. This is why we have things like MVP of awards or like Rookie of the Year or whatever, all right? Sports. I'm just saying it's a model we understand. The nested model of I am playing this as a member of a team, but I am also playing this as a member of myself. I want to be successful, right? So that's how a lot of role-playing games do it, where they're like, if you are playing Blades in the Dark, you are a member of the Bloodletters, and you want the Bloodletters to succeed, but you also want to become a better individual Slide or Spider or whatever, cutter, right? You want to be your own individual improving thing. In the same way, this is why I like individual rewards in Dungeons and Dragons, because I like disparity between characters. I like characters getting rewarded for specific behaviors. So the question then becomes, are there any systems whose reward structure is make someone else the MVP? The problem here is, what do we reward them with? Right? Like, if my job is to give other people the spotlight, I'm not going to get to do much, right? I am the best player in a game. Let's imagine a game where your reward is you only get rewarded for giving other people a chance to talk about their character, but they get no reward. Everybody in the game is it's a Canadian standoff. That's it. We've reached a Canadian standoff with this system, because it's like, no, go ahead. Please tell me about your character. No. Just like, you go. I want to know more about you. No, you tell me. No, you. And really what you're doing is, I want the XP. No, shut up. You talk, you get the XP. Right. And like it's this awkward position where you're trying to spotlight each other and nobody wants to take the spotlight. Right. Nobody gets to do anything if the reward system is just boosting each other. Yeah, it's a hot potato, right? You don't actually want the spotlight. You want to give it away. So I think the closest that we get is either a system that determines the spotlight for us, and then we get rewards for playing along. I'm thinking particularly of, I'll give you a brief description. I haven't played this game in forever, but for a while, I'm going to put on my old man hat. So back in the day, after Sorcerer came out and after Troll Babe came out, we were looking for games that would be the new hot thing. Now, this was well before, apparently I turned into Jimmy Stewart when I'm talking about being old. Well, this was well before Powered by the Apocalypse came out, and there was a game called Primetime Adventures. It's like the early 2000s. Primetime Adventures came out, and Primetime Adventures is a role-playing game about making a TV show. You decide on a length of the run for your season. You do a pitch session, basically episode 0. You sit down, you come up with like, what is this show going to be about? And then by way of fan mail and some randomization and some structuring tools, every episode, you know how much the spotlight is on one character. So before you go into episode 2, you can say, all right, this is going to be 80% a Berg episode, 10% a Maharib episode, 5%, and you can break down how much spotlight each character is going to get, and then it's everybody's job to either play like the spotlight character or a support character or whatever, and by the end of the season, everyone gets kind of a personal highlight episode, and you tie up arcs, and your job, when someone is in the spotlight, your job is to understand and trigger their character's stuff. So if it's a Berg episode, if this is a Berg episode with a Ramus back, right, a Ramus chaser, Ramus is going to be in the secondary support role, and then everybody else is in lesser roles. And the idea is you want to make this about the connections between Ramus and Berg with a focus on Berg. You want to understand Berg's character's needs and beliefs, and it takes the whole episode and essentially puts that spotlight on that character. So in that way, I think it sort of answers your question, right? It gives you this go look at Primetime Adventures as an example of this. And then there are a bunch of other games that are related to Primetime, to PTA, that came out around the same time, right? Or a little after. So go forth and look into that lineage in the old before times and see if any of those get you going. I think the trick here is rewards in a game are for doing things, right? Yes, it's okay to have a reward system in the game for being the most helpful player. Lots of games do this, right? But it shouldn't, I think, be the core reward structure of the game because it's about enabling someone else to do something. They should be the one getting the reward, right? Look at the currency of your game. I think that in a game like D&D, a secondary reward currency, which is to say like inspiration. I think inspiration is a tool you can use to give out when people boost or spotlight each other. Yeah, like the main reward in D&D is experience, but handing out some other form of like reroll or Benny or luck tokens or whatever. Yeah, exactly. Those things can be a great way to say, hey, you're boosting this other character's spotlight right now. Take this point, right? It's like, look at Tenrybancho Zero, right? Tenrybancho Zero has the ki, right? Those points the audience is supposed to throw at the players. Those can be rewarded for being an excellent spotlighter, right? I think that's great. I think that there are places where that stuff can happen, but I don't know that there's any games where it's our primary reward, except when that is the purpose of a specific playbook. Now, in Girl by Moonlight, I think chat mentioned this. There's going to be a like a support class. I think there's the Spider has some of this too. You can build in individual rewards for teasing out information about characters, right? Where you can give someone a reward if you learn something. So for example, okay, so you make a playbook and their job is they're the spy master, right? They learn secrets. Put one of their goals as a personal experience reward for them. Put one of their goals, mark experience if you learn something secret about another PC, right? You could have one that's like earn an experience if you help someone else accomplish their goal. Look at the good alignments in Dungeon World, right? There are a few of those, like help someone grow. So I don't think that there is an experience. Experience should reward players for doing things in the fiction. You shouldn't reward players. And this is the thing. Okay, I'm going to just extrapolate a little bit on this question because apparently I'm going to go on a tear. Giving someone experience for choosing an out of game behavior feels to me like a violation of the fact that we're playing a game together. This is like whoever brings me a pizza gets 5 experience. That has nothing to do with the game. It modifies the game's social layer, but I don't really like it as a game reward. I think if you want to do this spotlighting thing, instead of saying when you spotlight another character, find a way to express that in character, right? So show what the characters actually are doing and give rewards for that. Because again, the players may be spending the points. They may be the ones holding the purse strings on the XP wallet, but giving out points for out of character stuff is a very different it's a very different experience than one that where you get experiences within the game. Now, it doesn't mean you can't do both, right? You can give players a currency that does not belong to the character, right? Now, this is the advanced model. You can still give out stuff like hero points. You can give out stuff like inspiration for out of game things because those are spent by the players on their character. You're saying to a player, like for example, and Dave brought up a really good point in chat. You can give out points for somebody updating everybody with the rules, but those points don't belong to the character. There's something that player can then spend on their character in a moment where they need it, right? So these are like fate points. These are like inspiration. You give it to the player and you say, okay, here you go. So I appreciate what you did for the group at a social level. As a result, you're being rewarded with this thing. So now when you're in a situation that matters to your character, you have a higher chance of getting out of there. But I think that you need to design that as a separate thing. And it's a little bit icky sometimes, right? I've seen this presented, and that's the technical role-playing game design term for it, icky. there is this awkward thing that happens where why does the GM get to hold all of those? Like who put the game master in charge of deciding to reward? Like, I don't like the idea that my game master is going to give out dog treats for me doing stuff. Like I want to do that because it's the right thing to do, you know? Like it leads to this weird thing where players are doing things they should just be doing. You're gamifying them. It feels to me more like advertising than it feels like, or parenting than it feels like game design. So I like to keep that stuff focused on the game level. I mean, it's nice to appreciate people when they do nice things, but I think that I don't know. It's a bit odd. It's a tough thing. And I think it comes down to group preference in a lot of ways. Because some groups like that. Some groups like saying like, you know, we rotate, you know, bringing pizza. And if it's your week and you remember to bring the pizza, we all get to eat pizza. And because we like you so much, your character gets a bonus inspiration this session. But it's like the group agrees that those are the structures you do it. I don't like GMs that just hand out in-game benefits like bonus experience or whatever for out-of-game stuff that probably the group should just be dealing with together. And the thing is, if you need to give somebody inspiration to do something nice, there's some other complex stuff here. You don't want it to be like Pavlovian positive response to things. So anyway, I think that if it matters to your game, if you're designing a game with either a character class who is like a support character, or you want all of the characters, you could easily build this into a game like Blades, where you say all of the characters have a trigger that is related to another character. So if you do this and we learn something about someone else, then you get experience. So again, look at Blades, look at Primetime Adventures, look at games that reward you for learning things and sharing them with the group, and see how that might fit. Again, take a look at the good alignment triggers in Dungeon World as well. Yeah, it's an interesting question because I think we think about this a lot as players. Like, I think it's very good behavior to spotlight other players, but it's not a good move to act like the GM is the banker who has all of the points and then hands them out to the players like we're in an Oliver Twistian game design orphanage or something. We're all better than that. We're humans. I mean, maybe not. Maybe some of you are robots. That's your business.
Hi, Mr. Cobalt. I was hosting a session of the award-winning game Dungeon World at a small local con recently, and I ran into a problem with one of my players. During character creation, all the players seemed to be enjoying getting an idea of how a more narrative-focused game played. However, after we started playing, one of the players developed from an interesting bard into a murder hobo. In character creation, he was a destitute son of a famous reformer trying to make it on his own, without exploiting the fame of their father. Once play started, though, they turned into a psychopathic murderer and pyromaniac. As the rules of Dungeon World say, I tried my best to be a fan of the characters, and let the player fulfill some of his murder hobo goals while not getting in the way of other players. But I felt his actions removed many of the interesting interactions that other players could have had. I felt the narrative of the session ran out of steam from this player's actions, and the session ended with more than an hour left from the allocated time. All the players said they really enjoyed the session, and I felt like I was able to give all the players an interesting narrative arc, but none of the less I felt I was unable to fully give the players the opportunity to explore their characters. If all the players had a good time, is this even an issue that needs solving? And if it is, what would be the best way to deal with a player in this situation?
Well, Bardak, so let me active listening you for a second. So it sounds to me like Bardak was at a convention or somewhere where there was like a constrained amount of one-shot time. Yeah, local con. Okay. So Bardak's at a convention. You get everybody together. You do character creation. You get some ideas. You run into the game. You start playing. One character takes a turn you didn't expect, gets kind of murder hobo-y, and you try to play along. You help aim that player's murder hobo goals towards a productive end. You finish the session early because you're not really sure how to like extend it. It comes to an ending. You feel like it didn't work out the way you wanted. You're feeling like not great about the results, and you check in with the players, but everybody's like, yeah, that was great. I had such a fun time. Everybody got an interesting narrative arc, but you still feel a bit weird about it afterwards. What do you do? Or what should you have done? There's a lot going on here, Bardak, because I think we have to trust people when they say that they had a good time. I know a lot of people are like overly polite, and they're not going to say to you like, you know, if you're there at the table after the game, you're like, did everyone have a good time? It's not going to be like, yeah, no, this game sucks. Fuck you. Actually, I take that back. If you're doing this at Gen Con, the chances of you having someone at the table who's going to be like, this game sucks, I wish I played Pathfinder, is actually pretty high. So if they all said that they had a good time, you kind of have to believe them, right? You're going to have to be like, no, you know what? That's fine. But I'm worried that Bardak belongs to a very particular, slightly masochistic, kind of like after the fact sort of Eeyore style GM. And I have been in this position, Bardak. I've been here. Let's talk about it. So there's this thing that can happen when you're the GM because of lots of different social and game reasons where everybody had fun but you, right? So you're like, all right, all the players had a great time. I didn't have fun. But because all the players had fun and I didn't, it's still a win, right? Like Bardak, if you're feeling like, okay, everybody had a great time, but I'm miserable, I guess I'll just go home. You deserve to have fun too. Now, it's not your job to make everybody else have a good time. If everybody else had a good time and you didn't, your bad time counts. Like that's a fail for you. Now you can have multiple success and failure vectors, right? Like for me, I can have an episode that I'm not really like all that happy about in the moment, right? And maybe some of the players had an okay time, but other players didn't really get to say much. But if the audience had a great time, right? If we have like massive numbers, great comments on the YouTube video, people get really excited about the episode, that's a win according to one vector. It's a lose if I don't have fun, and it's a lose if the players didn't have fun, but it's a win on the audience vector. Ideally, every session of a game, GM has a little bit of fun, players have a little bit of fun, and if you're like me, the audience has a great time too, and you get to go home happy. Or in my case, stay home. You don't get kicked out of your house. So by one vector, Bardak, you did exactly what you needed to do. You are the picture of the long-suffering GM who tries to make everybody's fun happen, even though one player is being kind of a douche nozzle about it. By some vectors, you have accomplished that ultimate goal of being a game master. Everyone had fun and you're miserable. There are some people who would say you have succeeded. That is a very Gygaxian approach to playing role-playing games. That like, I suffered for these pathetic players. Watch as they dance and flop about for my entertainment. I'm miserable, but hey, at least they had fun. Now, the inverse of this is the killer GM who's just like, I murdered all of the characters. All of the players are miserable, but I'm forcing them to come back next week. Right? That is, there's the sadist and the masochist GM. And I think both extremes of that spectrum are harmful to everyone involved. You don't want to be that. You deserve better. Your players deserve better, right? What you want is for everyone to work together to have fun for each other. So, if you do not want to be Eeyore the Game Master, right? Here's what you could do. Now, I am absolutely proud of you for making the best of a bad situation. I know it's so hard to be like, hey, I know everybody's kind of having a good time, but I'm having a bit of trouble like dealing with your murder hobo stuff. Can you rein it in? I know that that's hard. Honestly, I probably wouldn't do it either. I'm way more an Eeyore than I am a Gygax, right? Like, if that's the scale, if we have evil Gygaxian GM on one side and like, oh, well, at least everybody else had. That was kind of John Wayne. Well, all right. Welcome to the game, everybody. I'm definitely on that end where I'm like, no, please, players, make me miserable. No, yes, chat, yell at me about how I'm wrong. I'll do better next time. Right? I'm definitely more a masochist GM than I am a sadist GM because I think that people appreciate masochistic GMs more, right? They're like, you suffered for us. Good job. Thank you. Let's do it again, right? I think that you need to remember your fun matters. Let's try to move that needle, not all the way over to the Gygaxian side, but let's remember that unless you're having fun suffering, because let's not say that it can't be fun to be Eeyore, because some people like it when they have 4 people yelling at them for 4 hours and taking advantage of them and beating up their stuff, and some people enjoy that, but there's a memory here that if you're not having fun, you have to remember things need to change. We need to move that needle a little. So here's what I would suggest. I know that these people are strangers. I know that they don't understand the game as well as you do, maybe. I know you want them to have a good time. That for me, at least, the idea that if the players come away from the table saying like, that was super fun, I had a great time, I can't wait to play again, the audience is into it, even if I'm exhausted and miserable, there is some part of me that's like, yes, good, suffer. Right? That is hard to move away from. But you know what? Here's what you can do. If you're playing a one shot at a con and you don't have a break scheduled, schedule one. Like, do not go into a convention time slot without at least a few minutes somewhere in there for you to take a scheduled break. Because the difference between, hey guys, I know that we're all in the middle of a scene, but can we stop for a minute? I need to take a break. Also, Bard, come with me. We're getting water, right? I know that's a lot harder than beep, 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 beep. Oh, looks like it's 12 o'clock. We all need to take a minute and let's go get water. Everybody take a break. While you're on your break, you can find the Bard player and be like, hey friend, so maybe you and me, we can talk, because I'm enjoying that you're into it. Right? I enjoy that you're having a good time, but like, I'm struggling a little bit, trying to keep you in the group. I know that your murder hobo stuff is fun and cool, but would it be possible for you to angle in on like supporting the other characters? And like, honestly, this takes vulnerability, right? This is where we are right up against the border of a hot for teacher question here. So here's the thing, Bardak. It requires vulnerability. Being a game master, more than any other role, requires that you are vulnerable. You are a player in your game. You are being creative with these people. You are trying to do your best job. Admitting to someone you are struggling, especially someone who is causing that struggle, can be very difficult. So here's what I would do. Express what you are feeling from your perspective, right? Don't be like, all right, Shakespeare, you're fucking up my shit. I'm tired of the way you're acting. You're being a murder hobo. You're bringing me down. Fix it. Instead, try, I'm really enjoying thing you're enjoying about the character's play, right? Be like, oh, it was really cool when you did this thing. I'm really enjoying it. It seems like this is what you're excited about for playing the Bard, but I'm having a hard time keeping the game going because behavior, right? When this stuff happens in the game, it causes trouble for me in this way, right? I think it's important to acknowledge that it is about a change in behavior, but not like you're fucking this up, because they're trying to, right? Especially if they don't know the system. Maybe they're relying on old habits. Remember, when people are forced to be creative, which is what a role-playing game is, 9 times out of 10, and this comes from playing Fiasco and talking to Jason Morningstar about Fiasco, when people don't know what they're doing, or they're uncomfortable, or they're not certain, right? They go weird. They go gonzo, they go overboard, they go over the top. You can see it in one-shots on roleplay. You can see it in somebody's first episode of a new show. I could find you clips that show people doing this where they're like, I don't understand what to do, so I'm going to go way over the top so that we can all laugh, because laughter breaks tension, and now we don't feel tense anymore because I did something funny. And then, boom, dopamine, right? Oh, if I act all over the top and crazy, everybody laughs, and that laughter feels good, and now I feel less tense. I'm going to do it again. And so sometimes you can get into a loop where an individual player, or often two players, will do this, right? They'll play off each other and everybody else just watches them play the game, including the GM. And you don't want that, right? So on a scheduled break, take this person aside, explain to them how you're feeling, tell them that this is something that is causing trouble for you, and ask for their help, right? Like, bring them in. Don't be like, fix this or fuck off. Be like, okay, I have an idea. Here is something I'd like you to be a part of with me, right? And that, I think, is really important, to like invite them in to be on your side, to say, okay, so I don't know if you've noticed this, Shakespeare, but we have a player at the table, Avon the Wizard, and he's being kind of quiet. I think he's having a hard time feeling comfortable. Can you help me? Like, you're playing the Bard, right? And the Bard is a really social character. And in the next scene, I would really love it if you and Avon have a conversation. And then give them something to do, right? Because I find, and again, this is a bit of like an underhanded playing with children kind of trick, but like making them your assistant. It's like why we give little pins in the shape of wings to junior flyers on planes, because it's not about the like, hey, welcome to the plane, kid, here's some wings. It's about like, hi, I'm the captain of the plane. It's my job to make sure that the plane gets where it needs to go safely. And to do that, I need all of my passengers to be on their best behavior. Do you think you can help me with that? And the kid's like, yeah, I want to be a junior pilot, right? And so you can say, okay, so here's what you can do to help me. You know, you can stay in your seat. You can pay attention to the seatbelt light. You can like do all this good behavior. And to signify your role as junior pilot, here is a little badge, right? And you put the junior pilot badge on them, and now it has shifted their mind space, right? And the way you do this with adults is give them responsibility, and most of the time, rather than disappoint you, they will rise to meet that responsibility, right? If you want someone to be more responsible, ironically, sometimes you have to give them more opportunity to be responsible. It's scary and it's hard, especially with strangers. But honestly, like, it's a trick that works. I know, like I do it too. Like, if somebody says to me, hey, Adam, I have something I need you to do, and I want to impress that person, I care about what they think, I'll be like, yeah, I'll do a good job. Don't worry. I'll impress you. You're going to like it. And it's a trick. It's a way to manipulate people into doing things, but it's just part of like how interacting with people goes, especially strangers. You know, if you were friends with this person, if you knew them a long time, if this was a long running campaign, I'd probably give you different advice. I would probably say, be more direct, tell them they're fucking with your shit and that you need them to behave differently to continue having a good time. But I think that with strangers, you have to take care of things a little more. You have to be a little bit more careful. So yeah, I don't know. I initially reading Bardak's question, I thought, you know what, Bardak, if everybody had fun, probably like, I guess, deal with it. But the more I read it, the more I thought about it, the more I realized like Bardak, and to a degree myself and some other GMs, we need to move away from the Eeyore end of the spectrum. You know, if a game goes great, if your players had a good time, if you have an audience and they engaged, if everybody's really excited and happy to play again, if you engage the system and you are miserable, that's a failure. You failed. The game is a failure. Because it's just as much everyone else's job to make the game fun for each other. And I have some thoughts about this. And I don't know that they're fully formed, and so maybe I'll save them for another episode. But like, I think there are some responsibilities of being a good Twitch RPG audience member too. I think that it's like, it's like going to a movie or going to the theater. No, it's like going to the theater because it's live. We see you reacting. You and your responses in chat affect us, just like we affect you with our performance. I think that there are ways to be a good member of a Twitch audience above and beyond just being an audience. Like, looking up rules, the way you present that information. I think that there is definitely something to it. I think that there is a responsibility in like observing live. And I don't know why I hadn't really thought about it before, but like there are behaviors. If you're watching a live theater, you are responsible for certain things. Yeah. How regularly do we read chat during the game? About this regularly. Interesting. Yeah, maybe there's something. Maybe there's something to this. Something to ponder. Thank you, Bardak. Thanks for getting me thinking about that. This Jesus, like time flies. This has been episode number 92 of Office Hours. Thank you, Bardak, Aurora, and Alex for submitting your questions. If you have a question, you can submit it to me. Please do. I love them. I love getting them. I love reading them. I love all of it. Go to my website, www.adam-koble.com. Click on the Office Hours link. Fill out the form. Submit your lovely voice. Please let me hear you. If you don't want to, that's okay. Just in that field, be like, no, thank you. That's allowed too. And in a future episode, I'll answer your question. Now, there is another show. We intersperse this one with another show, the spin-off show, Hot for Teacher, which you got a little glimpse of today. If your question is more about your relationship with the other people at your table, or at work, or in the classroom, or whatever, if you wanna talk about that, that's Hot for Teacher. Same thing, adam-koble.com. Check out the Hot for Teacher link. If you haven't watched an episode of the old HFT, go check that out. It's on YouTube as well. But that's it for today's episode of Office Hours. Thank you for coming, and as always, like, thank you for getting my brain going about role-playing games. These episodes, they're not just for me to help you. They get me fired up too. So thanks. And I guess we will see you next time for more. Bye, everybody.